Our next speaker, Tony Cocilovo. He's of Sicilian ancestry, significant in history because that's where the original Pythagorean music school was, and our whole system of music developed from that area. And he seems to be kind of a musical guy anyway, as we met last night. He's got several patents on a photon stimulator. He's been into color and light therapy for 26 years. Comes from Prescott, Arizona, and today he's simply presenting to us a new health model. So let's welcome Tony Cocilovo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a real honor and a privilege to be here, and I'm humbled by some of the lectures I've heard so far. I'm in an altered state at this point due to driving for 12 and a half hours yesterday. Everything's still a little other dimensional. Before I get started, I wanted to mention that since I'm talking about light therapies and Dr. Gordon had presented earlier about lots of electromagnetic influences and the effects of light, I've changed my whole presentation, and I've taken down a number of notes about which way I'd like to go with it. So rather than using a PowerPoint or too many transparencies, we're really going to have an exciting time because I'm going to present what I know. The last 20 years of my life, I've been surrounded and involved with the most cutting-edge alternative practitioners, medical doctors, and are included in that, from around the world, and I have learned one hell of a lot. And I think it's a shame that the rest of these seats aren't filled up because they're going to miss some really incredible and new information about health. Health is a big thing. It's nothing you're going to take care of by applying a device to it. You can certainly get rid of some symptoms and quite often relieve chronic situations and certainly acute situations, but health is big, and that's what I'm going to approach. For people who are interested in knowing what health is about and how to approach health, these are the big issues that I'm going to talk about. But of course, since this is relative to the photon stimulator, which is a pulsed and colored light device that uses pulsed xenon noble gas to produce a light in a series of very specific colored gels that were researched for 40 years and used by medical doctors in this country. I'm going to talk about that. The field of photonics, as most of you know or don't know, literally manipulates our whole world. My son, who's now going into U of A studying photonics, when he says photonics to anyone, they don't really know what he's talking about. As you all know, it's the study of light, optics, and engineering. Everything in our communication systems, diagnostic medical equipment, MRIs, everything that studies the heavens, it's light. You no longer have to wait to enter the enlightened era. We're in it. And we're just waiting for the rest of the people to acknowledge it and understand it, that we are in the era of light. It was just 6 months ago the first computer was made using light signals in Israel. And so far it's 10,000 times faster than what we have. So light is here to stay. Light is what we're made of. One of the problems that I noticed relative to the way we approach light and water and gravity is institutionalism. Institutions were developed to maintain information, and that's exactly what they do. They don't necessarily develop information or move on. They mostly maintain it using the paradigms that originally existed. Most of our paradigms for light and gravity, composition of water, mostly everything we have in our world was given to us by about 6 people. Everyone else has made variations upon it. Now, if Tesla's work was taken in a grander way rather than just AC current, he would have had more of an effect on us than any of the others. So the institutions that sequester and hoard a lot of the physics that we accept automatically. You take astronomy books 101, and they tell you what's reality. They tell you about redshifts and black holes. And it's accepted, and you don't question that thereafter. or you don't become a member of the institution, you don't get funding, you don't get grants. So relative when someone says this is a study by this institution or this person is degreed in that, that's a good point now because we're at the change of information level at our era of humanity. We're at a phenomenal change of information level that if you start noticing it, you will see that these institutions won't change from within. They'll only be changed by people like yourselves who are doing things outside institutions, and then eventually the institutions fall. One of these small items, and I certainly respect all of Dr. Gordon's information, is he had a question about LED, and Dr. Gordon answered that low-level lasers didn't have an effect that he saw. We didn't evolve with laser light. When laser light hits the body, there's a Monte Carlo effect, and you can look that one up on the web. It has to scatter it. The body does not evolve with coherent single beam light. We evolved with full spectrum, wider, very scattered spectral fingerprints, just like a fingerprint. Things, especially all the minerals and elements in our world, when light hits them and reflects and hits our body, have spectral fingerprints. Not all light is made the same. Current physics finds that light's a movement from one electron level to a higher electron shift. And working within those paradigms, when you do research within those paradigms, you're limited to the results and findings of your electronic devices and that you build according to those paradigms. I've only got an hour here, and I'm going to try to just skip a lot, move on, and get to the points that I was initially talking about. But that was just a way to kind of frame it. We've been talking about frequencies. The earlier discussions were about frequencies. I've been involved with frequencies and frequency devices as a real matter of being involved with it on at least 6 different countries: Italy, France, England, Germany, the United States, now Colombia. I have discussions and emails with people that are using my device in all of these countries as a research device, the results they have, the empirical science that goes on with it, which is incredibly formidable. Also, I think Dr. Gordon mentioned about, the government and LEDs. Now, I'm not necessarily in favor of LEDs, but LED is a different type of light than laser. Right now, the government, which you can also research on the web, is buying 60,000 devices using LEDs for battlefield wound healing. So there are these things out there, and there is different information that comes from different sources. The Photon Stimulator, as I built it, started, I was an iridologist, and I was European trained. Iridology in America is not respected, and I don't blame it, because it's forwarded by herb companies who want people to believe the iris structure changes in the eye. It doesn't. European iridology is taught in medical schools. So I was living in France and happened to come across Dr. Pierre Franier, medical doctor who was doing some research on using pulsed and colored light in the eyes. He was from Lyon. I live just north of that. And he was aware of a gentleman called Dr. Nogier, neurologist, who was experimenting with the autonomic nervous system by shining pulsed light onto the autonomic nerve wreath in the iris and found that he can alter it. We got a little squirrely. The letter moved on to the ear. These points are on related to acupuncture meridians. How many know what a meridian system is? That's quite a few. Russians in '78 at the University of Novosibirsk, Space Science City, did very intense studies with putting light on the body, late 70s. They wanted to do a 6-month experiment. They put intense light on the body. They used frogs' eyes as sensors back then. And they discovered that where they put light in, it came out at other points of the body. Dr. Gordon didn't mention that light goes through the body when it affects a meridian. Surface of the skin, not. We could pop up the first. Now, what is a meridian? I'm going to get into, because even I've been surrounded by, I go to acupuncture schools, I'm married to an acupuncturist. What is a meridian? It's energy, it's mystical, it's chi. And most of the acupuncturists I know love to keep it mystical. They want it to be so mystical that nobody can name it, it stays away. Our government doesn't recognize that energy flow officially. So if you talk about energy systems, et cetera, it's not even acknowledged by FDA. These are some points on the face and the body. Thank you. Face and the body, just to give you some examples of some points along the body. That's all. Next slide, please. Sideways. I'll give a quick description of the Meridians. I followed a lot of the works of Peter Bros. Anybody hear of Peter Bros? Phenomenal. Wonderful books with some alternative physics. One book's called Light. Essentially, if the Earth did not turn and the sun beat on it, we'd either be fried or frozen. Right? Very simple. Because the Earth moves, we have life, as opposed to being fried or frozen. Now, during the day, we have, let's, for sake of lack of a better word, call them electrons from the sun in, and at night they go out. That's movement, okay? We have an in and an out, an in and an out. Plants open up, and they want to hold that in during the day. Wherever there's this electron movement, there's life. The start of a meridian flow is dependent upon light and all that means, which we're starting to approach, hopefully. Light, as it entered and left, became the nourishing river upon which all our organ systems then became built. Pretty simple. Not a really complicated thing. We had a Dr. Wu, a Chinese doctor who was staying in San Francisco, come over to Prescott, where I live, and we had him train us and teach us on how to do Qigong, laying on of hands, etc. And his description, do we have the yin-yang? You've seen this one a million times, right? But we asked him, what was his take on the yin-yang symbol? And essentially that was exactly what I said. Daytime, nighttime, you've got the sun in one and the moon in the other. And it was the flow dependent upon that sun-moon cycle. So there's no difference in where his ancient information held the same thing of what is chi, where does it come from? It's movement of the energy that initially was initialized by the sun. It's light. It's not laser light. It's not LED light. It's more full spectrum, and this is, whether you're a trilobite bouncing around in the ocean, developing a crust upon which you've encased those meridian flows so you could be ambulatory. Not survival of the fittest, survival of the one that can adapt best to its environment. In a certain way that's fittest, but the adaptation is what's most important. And as we'll see, it's the adaptation of your physical body to your environment that either makes or breaks you, and which is why most of us are being broken at this point. Our environment's changing faster than our ability to adapt. So how can light then, when it's applied to the body, be helpful? After just the description I gave you, it becomes incredibly obvious. Light, when applied to a meridian system, reinforces the original energy, and Oshman, James Oshman, in his book, Energy Medicine, describes how it could produce a solitonic wave. Who knows what a solitonic wave is? Do we have any hands? Very few. I think he describes it kind of like a tidal wave. Goes through the ocean, doesn't even harm a jellyfish, but if it hits a blockage, it destroys it. That's a nice analogy to a solitonic wave. And also, you've heard about other effects of how light goes through the body. Each cell is a phospholipid coating. That's phosphorus. Phosphorus is what? An incredibly light sensitive and light-producing element. And fat and phosphorus are the gatekeepers to each cell. The signals that come in are auditory and light, photonic. Pop in Germany did and continues to do phenomenal amounts of research. It's probably one of the most respected light researchers in the world. And does such research as, you may have heard of this research, that volcanic rock and soil emits light. This light affects the nodules of growing plants. Now, Pop didn't believe that rocks emitted light, unless they were treated first. And he and his staff were absolutely amazed when they got some rocks from the United States. And yes, they emit light. And they emit light that affects the nodules on the roots of plants that causes growth factors. And that light goes through soil. It goes through your body, and it goes through a cytoskeleton matrix. You know the piezoelectric effect. Every time you light your stove, right, you're squeezing a piece of quartz. All that calcium in your body acts like a crystal. Every time you move, you're producing another electromagnetic effect, but also a photonic effect. And that photonic effect goes through, we have thousands and thousands of continuously reinforcing or degrading light signals. This light up here, there you go, just mentions that we went from, in our history of approaching the body, went from structural, chemical, and electromagnetic. Now, going into the photonic and the acoustic is where the cutting edge information is now, photonic and acoustic. Regular cancer research emits, injects things into cancerous tumors and then runs tiny LEDs up through wires into the cancer, and that reacts with the chemical. They treat glial cells in your mouth, part of a cancer thing, with light straight by itself. So much is going on. I mean, it's really hard for me to approach. I mean, one of the stances that people that often present is that, this is, new, unique, strange, and different. This has been going on, and it goes on, and it goes on in an incredible way. Of course, the first thing was lasers, then LEDs. Rife used a noble gas. I use a noble gas. It's xenon. I got a patent for it, and nobody's probably heard of it because I don't do much marketing. Using optic fiber and pulsed xenon light. And I was early on. And next slide. When I was in France and I wanted to develop a device to mess around treating the body by using light, and I came back to the United States, married an acupuncturist, found that it was really squirrely, again, treating the iris, so I ended up treating acupuncture points, found all this research relative to meridians and acupuncture points and how light goes through it and does multiple things. Increases transcellular permeability, energizes cells. But all of that, it's, as people, you can take it or leave it. The average person wants to get better and they feel like hell, they're like, okay, so what do I do? It works or doesn't work. I could give, depending on what I tell you, I would be a matter of verbs and how convincing I was to you whether it worked or not. But I can tell you after doing this for so many years, the empirical research that's been done by myself and others, I could give you story after story after story of phenomenal and miraculous things that happen. Someone, multiple sclerosis for 15 years, one treatment gone, and continued to stay all out of pain for 6 months. Everything that could be done with acupuncture and the crudeness of needles can be done with light a lot faster and easier. And anyone can do it. It's totally safe. It's like having a first aid kit, and that's the way we use the Photon Stimulator. Anytime we go anywhere, everybody lines up. Oh, treat this, treat that. When I go to conventions, which, up to 1,500 people, that's all I do for 4 days is treat people. And I do 2 points in the ear, 0 and Shen Men. 2 points, 30 seconds each. I get an 80% effectiveness report of relief of symptoms of those that come back next day, and say, hey, that's really great, that's really great. Phenomenal for sports medicine injuries. Now, for all the reasons that Dr. Gordon talked of, and you'll hear in other presentations, it works. Light works incredibly well. Light works by reinforcing the body's own system. That's it. I don't cure anything. If it happens, it's totally coincidental. Do not diagnose. I do not treat. I just reinforce the body's own system. And the body's own system uses light within its meridians to nourish the organs. And those organs are what you have or what you were born with, and they were all nourished by a flow going down the meridians. Now, throughout history, solariums for getting sunlight and treating with sunlight were really good. Now we have be afraid of the sun, wear sunscreen. And sun's still good, and the UVA, B, C's can have damaging effects. So we avoid sunlight. We go into tanning salons that now have been shown to do the exact same thing, tanning booths. So now to skip, it's half done already. Now to skip to the other part. Okay, I have a photon stimulator. You have questions? I'll be at my booth. You can try it out, see it. Numbers of different models, etc. Okay, now to get on, like people say, why doesn't it work? Why doesn't it work for everything if it's so effective? That is where I'm going to go with this. Now, talk about electromagnetic fields and, frequency devices. We exist within a phenomenally huge, some people, when you go through energetic shifts, all of a sudden you're not riding in your car, getting to work. You're riding on the surface of a planet. It's a perceptual shift. When you're on the surface of a planet, it's a whole different feeling. You're on a planet and you're in space and there's all these other planets around. The field we are in is incredibly huge. The weight of the air pressure is heavy. When it's humid, we feel it because it gets denser. It weighs on us. These are huge things. You couldn't convince, I don't know, someone said this, I heard this and I liked it, a deep sea fish of the existence of water. He probably thinks he's flying. We are in a field that we are so unconscious of, and that we can do minute shifts with electromagnetic devices and hope miraculous things will happen. There are shifts, but we are still under a dominant, huge field. And one of these fields is pulsed electromagnetic field called the Schumann resonance. Anybody know what that is? Yeah, we would hope a number of people would. They think it's often said, the Schumann resonance pulses at 7.8. Oh, and now I heard on the web that it's gone up to 7.9 or 8. I just laugh because it's an average of between like 4 and 40, and it has to do with how many lightning strikes hit the surface of the Earth and cause a wave form to exist that goes between the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere. It's always been an average. It's not a stable pulse that goes boom, boom, boom. It's scattered. Low, up, down, low, up, down. If your heart did ever anything stable, the only time your heart ever maintains a stable beat is right before you die. Everything's scattered. All your pulses in your body are not stable and steady. They're very chaotic. Your body is chaos for sure. It's not stable. So, next one. Oh, there it is. Yeah, go to the next one too. That's just an example of the waveform between the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere. So we can go to the next slide. See what we have. That's a diagram. We lowered a bit. It's a schematic of the autonomic nervous system. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But first I want to talk about a health model. This is a health model. What is health? You can either feel good at the time or you can live a long time in misery. Now, which one of those would be health? I don't know. But I'm not talking about subjective experience. Right now I'm going to separate the physical organism from a subjective experience. I didn't have a science background. I came from teaching humanities at the university level. And I think I have a little different take. I tried to put all of these, systems together, health systems, and hear what people were doing what practitioners, the most cutting edge practitioners are going to learn from what, where, and which country. There's a Dr. Carl Merritt who started the Dove Alliance between the United States and Europe to, establish cutting edge technologies. So as an iridologist, I know that we have incredibly strong genetic traits. So you have genes, all right? Number one, we have genetic influence. Number two, we have environmental influences. And that would include all the pollution, the place where you live, the electromagnetic fields where you live, et cetera, et cetera. The things you put on your skin, the things you put in your mouth, I would call that environmental also. And then we have emotional and cultural. The cultural effects are so underrated. And I'm going to explain some incredibly important information. That the cultural effects are why you want to do everything everybody else is doing. Most religions in the world, and people practice their religion because of where they were born. If you were born in one part of the world, you're Muslim. It's not because you have a superior intellect and you think God's there. It's because of where you were born. And we think we're superior beings. We have essentially a DNA in the physiological structure that says we're safer when we do what everybody else does. Same as a wolf, same as a dog pack, same as anything else. That's cultural. It can be additive and subtractive. Cultural says you need to make so much money, you need to have retirement, you need to have hospitalization. Cultural says if you have cancer, you go to the hospital, you go to the oncologist. Cultural says that you go to school, grammar school, high school, get a degree, get a job, buy toys, die. So those are all cultural. So cultural has a lot to affect our health. These are the real health issues with our health. Everything else is on a minute level when you want to use stuff on the body, including my photon stimulator. But the photon stimulator, by reinforcing your Meridian original system and the autonomic nervous system, which I'll get to in a minute, has an ability more than most every other device for helping the body do what it does when all those other systems are at an optimal level to let the body do that. Now I'm going to talk about emotional. That's the worst. Emotional. Stress is a result of emotion. Our emotional reactions are based on those same thing, DNA. They came with the body. Our body still evolved from an animal thing. We are not above it. And these are our emotions are tied into that culture, but mostly tied into sudden, unexpected shocks. You can pretty much map out anybody's disease life by timing the sudden, unexpected shocks. This is new information, right? There's a gentleman in Austria named Dr. Hammer, a medical doctor, ran a cancer clinic for years with thousands of patients. His son got shot, and his wife got cancer. He wanted to explore the reasons why. So over his research, et cetera, he developed some very interesting theories, which I hold tightly to. As a result, I developed biological conflict resolution therapy. You can treat the body, you can treat the organism, but if you want to get rid of the chronic things, you really need to treat the results of sudden, unexpected emotional shock. Now, this is his book that he put out. Of course, he got put in jail for all of his concepts and lost his medical license. But essentially, he started seeing artifacts on a CAT scan that look like a target, little ripples. Be a CAT scan, and there'll be ripples coming out from it in the brain areas, different brain areas. And he found that immediately when you have a sudden unexpected shock, you get a ripple in that brain area that corresponds embryologically. So you have 3 embryologic layers of tissue: outside, inside, and then the inside wall, which is your intestinal and autonomic nervous system tract. Okay, so you have outside, inside, ectoderm, endoderm, mesoderm, but essentially outside layer, your skin, etc. And he had to rewrite a lot of the old medical information about that because he found, well, with people with stomach ulcers, etc., it's an endodermic reaction, and he finds that our skin actually goes around down into our throats and top part of our stomach. So we found a lot of those. So he has maps of exactly where that center, that target is in that brain tissue, and exactly what embryological tissue it corresponds to. And then what happens, 2 things will happen when you're under the stress of the conflict. So you want to say sudden unexpected shock as a result of conflict. That would be a value conflict, emotional conflict, and they all relate to the same things as the wolf, which has food. We see that as money. Here's an example, like when a rabbit is being chased and it's fearing for its life, it'll freeze, go into dead position. Lizards lose their tails. This is the autonomic nervous system cutting off in control. Central nervous system stopping. So we have MS with us. People go through enough either long-term steady or sudden unexpected shock, MS, which means myelinated sheaths around the cells. Essentially, nervous system is not sending energy to that part of the body. The lizard lost his tail. People can no longer do that. It's a safety defense mechanism, same as the lizard. So is light going to work? Or any of these other things going to work? Have to address, as Hammer found, Dr. Hammer. First thing is to sequester these people from anyone else, and especially the medical system. What happens if you go to the medical system? You get another sudden unexpected shock. And then the relatives see you without any hair. You had another sudden unexpected shock. You get one sudden unexpected shock after the other. So there were 2 things that he found was absolutely worse: relatives and the medical system. So if somebody did have overgrowth, now there's 2 things that happen. You either get overgrowth or you get ulcerization, which is undergrowth, which is ulcers, and not always a result of acidity at all. It's just that when you get acid and you have undergrowth of cell mucosa membranes, you get irritated. But it's essentially ulcerization, so you get undergrowth or overgrowth. And how does the body do it? It does it by using viruses, bacteria, and fungus that it has sequestered in parts of its body, that when in times of those things happen, it pulls out and will either use the fungus, which cancer is, produce overgrowth, or ulcerization, produce undergrowth. Now, tricky part here. You say, well, now we know not to be around the medical system, not to be around relatives, not to be around anybody that's going to say, oh my God, you've got a tumor. We all have tumors, you know that? We all have tumors at different times of our life. If we're unlucky, we get to get diagnosed at the time we have them. Now, what makes a difference in all of this is how you handle it. The body either can work itself. Now, what happens is when you get over that emotional shock, it goes into another phase. And the body will then use bacteria to reconstruct. And when it's reconstructing, it floods with fluid, fills up. Brain, what does that appear to the regular medical system? Brain tumors. Fills up and engorges with water because it's filling it up with all the minerals it takes and all that to do rebuilding. Does it produce pain? Yes. Healing produces pain. We have learned in this culture to be afraid of pain. You might be in a healing situation when you have pain. So what he found is one of the best things, let the body do itself and just simply manage people. Because if you've been under 30 years of working under a boss you hate, you've been under a long, slow stress. So the first thing that happens when you retire, your body goes into healing and you have cardiac arrest. Because the healing response is so strong that it kills you. And this is what he found. If you have any long-term stressors that have been going on for more than 9 months, then when the body goes into its recovery phase, when it goes into the recovery phase, then it's going to, if it's with a stomach ulcer, it's going to produce a lot of cramps. You got to know what the healing response is, what it's doing. And it's going to be filling things up with water, having cramping, and having a large number of effects that also produce pain, which we would go to try to get relieved even though the body's healing. So this is new and different information. So I wanted to, all right, what do you do with this? I was a therapist for a while, and I have the pulsed and colored light. So I know that the autonomic nervous system is the mediator of a lot of this. A lot of this is done with talk therapy. Talk therapy is not that great. We find with the autonomic nervous system now, for those who don't know what the autonomic nervous system, it's the part of your body that operates without your conscious control. Actually, most of the parts of your body operate without your conscious control. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the diet we do. So without your conscious control, there are two parts of the autonomic nervous system. And our medical system says, oh, everything's in balance. You got to push and pull. The sympathetic is over here, the stress and response, and the parasympathetic's over here, and that's when you're relaxed. There's two different approaches to this. One is that the body's always operating with a push and pull. Yes, yes, yes. And it operates through certain mediators of the autonomic nervous system. However, the fight or flight, sudden unexpected shock response is only reserved for emergency use only. Emergency use only. Even when I talk to traditional acupuncturists from China, they say, oh, everything's balanced, balanced, balanced. No, emergency use only. And what happens during that time is your spleen pumps out a couple of pints of blood, you get more blood. Your vessels get tighter. All of your blood vessels are muscles. They're muscles. Right down to the tiniest one. The walls of those are muscles. And they get tight to handle the increased flow. And you know what? You're a starship. Might not be the Enterprise, but you know what? When you feel attacked and you go into sympathetic response, fight or flight, as they called it, which I never liked that word, all your energy from your center goes to your perimeter. And you remember the Starship Enterprise? It could not operate certain internal functions when that energy is in its shield, force field shield, right? 80% of Americans, when tested with heart rate variability monitors, are in hypersympathetic condition. You know what happens when you're in hypersympathetic? You go to sleep and your body doesn't heal. Your body doesn't heal when you're awake because it's all out here in your blood vessels. You get high blood pressure. You get all of the things going on. You get chronic conditions that literally could heal in 2 days, a day, sometimes hours. We've always heard of all these miraculous conditions, right? Miracle cures, things that happen when people are letting go and have faith, whether it's in a religion, a God, a friend, a healer. They let go and trust. You know what letting go and trusting does? Puts you in parasympathetic. Letting go and trusting. You can't get there any easier. Now, there's lots of people, and I know because as an iridologist, people are genetically influenced to insecurity and fear. We are not all the same. Some people let go real easy and can meditate. Other people are programmed for anxiety and fear, and it's all in their muscles, and you know how they get relief? They get relief by jogging, doing exercise, and doing physical things because it relieves the nerve energy that's in their exterior muscle and blood vessel hypersympathetic body. The closest they ever get to meditation is when they relieve slightly that flow of energy in their exterior. They never, hardly are able to get internal. Cannot meditate, talk to them forever, and they'll say, well, maybe, there's the ones who just don't do it, and they just go run. That's okay. But there are the other ones that, on a dime, can go inside and shut their thoughts. So what we're talking about is the parasympathetic nervous system and how when you're in there, the body heals itself. So what I found by using the photon stimulator, we use it on, there's 3 places in the body where there's embryologic parasympathetic tissue. Pupillary border. So I work and I train medical people, alternative practitioners, and individuals like yourselves how to do these things, how to treat the pupillary border, how to treat the concha of the ear and the navel. Immediately out of surgery, on a consistent basis, 50% reduction in pain by using violet light in the navel for 30 seconds. I'm not a big company. I'm an individual. I build each unit I make, and I sell each unit I make. I wanted to keep something fairly accessible to the public. So if I had distributors, it'd be up to $3,000. Now it's either, between $350 and $800. Autonomic nervous system. That other slide we had up would be good. Oh, no, skip that. Go on to the one after that. So is this interesting or what? This is phenomenal. This is groundbreaking, talking about health. This is health. This is what it's about. We can talk, you want to look at anxiety studies and stress studies, and everything's related to stress. Nothing in our culture is able to address how to move one into parasympathetic. We can, on every single study done, within 5 minutes, move all the parameters when people are hooked up on the Russian Prognos, Meridians diagnostic system devices, all heart rate variability monitors. Within 5 minutes, move person into parasympathetic using the photon stimulator. It's now used by psychological therapists who, before a client comes in, they treat either through the ear or the iris, and they get a much easier client that has issues come up a lot quicker and easier. Talk about the autonomic nervous system again. I have my slides all messed up. Excuse that. The autonomic nervous system can, just like with the lizard's tail, it knots things. So I was talking to a gentleman before, and he said, well, I don't have any of those issues anymore. The consciousness doesn't deal with the issues. What happened is the autonomic nervous system literally forms a knot around these things. You get enough knots and you're decreasing your efficiency. We are incredibly decreased efficiency people. To become completely efficient in our energy system and to be able to be in touch with things, to become your optimum potential means to relieve all of those autonomic sympathetic nervous system blocks. So you literally, your autonomic nervous system in your cytoskeleton, connective tissue matrix, causes energy blockages. How do you get rid of them? You bring them up and let them go by re-experiencing every single one. That's a long, slow way. There are other techniques out now which were developed about 20 years ago when they're available for emotional freedom. They have a lot in thought field therapy, emotional freedom techniques. Essentially, and they said it's meridians, but there's other Uzbekistan approaches that we have an energy field in front of us, and on our face and on our body, there's areas that by tapping and holding that memory up, say you were shamed in school when you were 7. All of a sudden you had a bladder control problem and you just were shamed, and after you just felt horrible, you didn't want to go to school, you developed hives, you had a rash. Years later, it's still sequestered in there, not completely dealt with. A lot of Vietnam vets. I offered this as a proposal for the whole U.S. vet thing, and they said they had it under consideration. But the research with it is phenomenal. People can get over everything, fear of heights, fears. Fears are results of things mostly from early childhood, if they're large chronic ones, held in reactions to heights. So by holding these memories up and the intensity, you bring it on. If you're afraid of spiders, you get somebody with a spider there, you look at a spider and you get the fear and you're holding it up. And there's a certain program of tapping and it literally releases that blocked sympathetic energy. So when I do biological conflict resolution therapy, I do that. We tap, we use the photon stimulator, and we relieve, and people all of a sudden then can reestablish that flow, that meridian and energetic flow. That's what it's about, a meridian and energetic flow. Your body and all the readings done on just about any type of machine can change almost instantly. And Dr. Gardner mentioned was 14 seconds after some type of trauma. Things change. It can change instantly. Cleve Baxter, who wrote Secret Life of Your Cells, took your glial cells out of your mouth, put them in New York, The minute you have something happen to you, they register on your cells in New York. So even if your cells aren't with you, they're still registering faster than the speed of light. And I don't want to get into, speeds of light and all the old concepts that are understood about that. Another thing that affects us, mentioned that we're in this incredible magnetic field. Right now we have solar shifts, we have planetary influences, we have all these other things. And this slide that up there is literally mentioned, someone put a triad formula up on the web, and it's just these influences of how electromagnetic affects us. That was it on that one. Go to the next one, see what we got. I think my time's just about up, so I want to mention, the autonomic nervous system. I mentioned that every vessel was a muscle. Dr. Nogier in France developed a vascular autonomic signal that anybody could monitor. And usually with a different group where everybody's up with each other, it's literally you take your radial pulse, or pulse in the neck, and you can go up and say boo or pinch somebody else's thing. You feel it. You can sense the muscle tension in the vessels. So it's a vascular autonomic signal. So I developed a way for treating the body, which I can demo at the booth, based on those signals, because that's an immediate biofeedback system, and I use it with the light in the iris. And it's immediate. And pain and, absolutely anything could be treated with it. But again, my point being, we have environment, we have the emotions, we have all these chemicals. Let's look. People talk about health. We're all here about health, right? If I asked, and I'm not going to ask, how many people use microwaves, right? And if you talk about electromagnetic fields, how many electromagnetic fields are you around today? There's enough research done by that Swiss doctor that says microwave effects go into the cells of the food and last for days in your body. You talk about health, you're using microwaves. They found out that plastic, all clear plastic, including all plastic baby bottles, Lexan, produces estrogen mimicking things which produced early sexual and breast development. It causes malformed of males' prostate glands when they're young. It causes breast cancer and uterine cancer. And yet, we love Nalgene bottles. They're so cool. Plastics. Those were huge in our environment. Not to mention the side chemicals, the solvents. Luckily, some solvents are good because, paint thinner kills candida. So the VAS, to get back to that, I just test that and we treat with that. So the next slide, there we go. Thanks.
Which slide?
Is there another one?
Nope.
Oh, that's the end of the slides. Isn't that lovely? So I'm going to ask if there's anyone that has any questions right now. Come down to the mic, please, because I covered enough to spend days here. Oh, no questions. That's just wonderful. Oh, there's one.
In talking about all this, you never covered the modality. You talked about the Meridians, and you talked about light, but I haven't had the privilege yet of seeing your machine. Could you just describe briefly how the machine interacts with the human, how the light actually interacts with the skin, and how it goes from machine to human to result?
Oh, all right. Remember when I mentioned that the original flow of meridians was based on light? So when skin as a whole, the way it works on skin is very different relative to meridians. I'm really focusing on meridians here. There's a lot of different ways that light interacts with the body. One is through cognitive processes by looking at pulse light. I've got studies here. Pulse light studies for relieving symptoms of PMS. We have emotional people using pulse light. I've got chiropractors in Arkansas using pulse light via the eye. They've got treating people with depression down to 2 treatments using violet. It actually, when light goes in, it does lots of things. And one of the things it does is it alters the signals that are given to your cell structure through the connective tissue. Again, this is a flow. Think of it as a pathway in the forest, right? There's a path in the forest, and every now and again, the log falls over. First of all, it clears and reinforces the original meridian pathway, okay? You got that, right? Yeah, it's not a complicated thing. The next thing it does is it energetically builds up energy in those cells. It increases the communication in the body. Now, as Oshman talks in his book, Energy Medicine, literally your body's ability to heal is a result of your body's own communication network within itself. It's communicating within itself. Your body's not healing as a result of chemistry. It's not healing as a result of all these things. It's a result of cells giving each other's cells signals, the right signals, what enzymes to produce, what enzymes to, what to mutate into, what to change. We're talking about a signal system, a well-oiled industrial machine, if you would. And what light does is it organizes. It organizes and it reinforces pathways, sends new signals that are clean. Not all light is just like water. Water comes from different sources. So does light. You get tungsten light, you get an effect of tungsten. You get xenon light, you get a wonderful, used to be 3% of the atmosphere. It's a noble gas, has the effects with 0 point. I'll get into that. It increases transcellular permeability. And that's, again, the ability to communicate within each other. The research done in all these different places, you can shine light in the body. Now, I'm never for, Petri dish experiments at all. But in the body, experiments that are done is, light comes out of healers' hands, light's transferred. We emit acoustical sound 6 feet out that affects others around us. This is the contemporary thing. But light going through a meridian is not hard to understand. It's very simple in what it does, reinforcing.
What were the 3 places that you do photon stimulation?
Well, I said...
The question was, what were the 3 places where you do photon stimulation? We're just about out of time here.
Yeah, we're just about out of time. No, you can do it anywhere. I do it on meridians. Mostly I do it on ears because it's easy. But if you wanted to affect parasympathetic embryological tissue, pupillary border, concha of the ear, and the navel.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony.
You're very welcome. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, and remember, we are all on our own for lunch. The greatest number of places near here is down at the intersection where the motels are, on the other side of the highway, on the east side of I-15. So we will be reassembling back here promptly at 1 o'clock. So have a good lunch if someone...